Alright, so in case you don't have Packmaster, you can just unwrap and go with this. It's not too bad. Of course it can be improved, but as you can see, all these spaces are not being used, which you're missing out on resolution. You could manually go around and scale some bits up and down, adjust the position however you want. Just a quick method of how I would do it. So for example, I would select the largest and most important areas, which require the most texture resolution, set them aside, select everything else. Just gonna move them a bit further off. Move those off, and then I would scale it up slightly and try to come up with the way to prioritize these areas. So you do your most important areas first, and then you could go back and position whatever you need else. Of course, you need everything inside of the UV space. So in this way, you could make compromises of make certain things larger, other things smaller, so that it does fit. Also, make sure to leave some sort of gap, preferably like around 5 pixels, so that when you bake textures, for example, in this case right here, the textures don't bleed over into other islands, which would cause errors. So having uniform spaces between each island would be preferable. I think I just noticed a problem. Oh no, I just placed the thing in the incorrect place. But yeah, you could do this manually. It will take a while. It's basically playing Tetris mixed with puzzle, jigsaw puzzle. Not fun, but you can do that way. Or you can just, as I said before, you can unwrap it if you're lazy. Or if you're super lazy and you do have money, you can use Packmaster. Okay, so just a little optimization technique. If we were to unwrap this, as you can see, it gives quite a lot of resolution. It's quite high res. If we were to pack this as well, it would slightly increase the resolution because it's utilizing more space. What we could do as well is select certain UV islands, such as the inside here, which you will most likely not see. So we're going to select a couple of those, which the person, player, whatever, is very unlikely to see. Alright, so as you can see, the areas that we're not likely to see are taking up quite a lot of space as well, so we can just scale it down. As you can see, the resolution goes down here, which doesn't matter because you're not going to see it anyway. You can take these bits as well. And once you have those scaled down, do not unwrap again, because if you unwrap again, it's just going to reset the work. So keep it like this and then hit pack again. And this time it retains the sizes, but it repositions everything again to be the most optimal way, the most optimal UV. As you can see, this area here, which you will see, high res. This area here, we are not likely to see, slightly lower res. So now I'm going to go throughout the entire model and pretty much do this thing. Just try to squeeze a bit more resolution out of it. Also forgot to mention, in this current model, I will be using a single texture map. So every single component, every single mesh will be on a single UV sheet. We're just going to use separate materials on Substance Painter. But if you wanted to, you could split up, give each mesh its own UV map. In this case, you can also get even higher resolution, of course, if you use 4K maps for each. Not the most efficient way, especially for games, but you can still do it. It's nothing wrong with it, really. But I'm just, for the sake of simplicity, we're just gonna pack it into a single UV sheet. Alright, so everything unwrapped, everything uniform. I will just go around and lower some reduce some island sizes. You can also, in the same way, increase island sizes if you want it to be more like higher resolution. That's also possible. Perhaps even preferable for some. So I'm just going to scale it down by 0.5. It doesn't have to be massive. Also, when it comes to really small bits like this, it doesn't even matter scaling it down because it will fill up the tiny gaps in the UV sheet. It's mostly for large areas such as these long bits or just very large areas. So in this case, these bits here I wouldn't even bother scaling down because it's going to fill in the gaps anyway, but I don't know. Let's scale it down anyway, just in case. Or just to prove a point, I guess. And I'm thinking maybe we could increase the UV sizes of these, perhaps, a tiny bit, so they are higher resolution, because, you know, when you aim down sizes, it is going to be up close. You could also increase the size of these ones as well, but I'm going to leave them as is. Okay, so whilst recording I forgot to mention that after you complete your seams and you start the UV process, you can select the entire mesh and Control T to triangulate. Later on I forgot to do that, so I had to come back and then redo that, and I will explain later on in the video why this has to be done. Alright, another good place to reduce resolution is the inside of the magazine, because you are very unlikely to see much detail there, especially when we add dirt and grime and other ambient occlusion based details. It's just going to completely block it out entirely. You wouldn't even see much anyway. So we're going to make it relatively smaller, probably 0.4 size. Yeah, that should do. Same thing here. We're never gonna see these bits. In fact, we could probably even delete them. But I've already done them, so we're just gonna scale it down 0.3. A lot smaller than it should be. Alright, so here we have the slightly more optimized UV sheet. We can just select it all. As I've said previously, you can do UVs however you like. You can automatically unpack them as well. But in our case, we're going to do this, and I'm going to use the pack master quick little tutorial on the pack mouse as well. I don't really use much of the settings. I just like to keep it simple. I'd usually go to heuristic. I'm not really sure how to pronounce the word, so I'm just gonna say it's heuristic. And enable it and give it maybe 10 to 15 seconds to let the CPU or GPU, whatever the algorithm uses, to give it more time to find a potentially even more efficient UV sheet other than just clicking pack. Alright, so once we have that enabled and we give it some time, we hit pack, and as you can see, it's gonna go through different combinations, different layouts, try to see which one is more efficient. There you go. Packed islands area 0.731. Quite good. Alright, so now we've done this, we can move on to baking. Right, we're going to close the UV window for now. We're not going to use it, hopefully. Unless there's issues with UVs, when we're going to have to come back to them to fix. But for now it's fine. We're going to select it. In the work folder we can create a new folder called the meshes, create another folder, bake textures, and another one, textures, just for the sake of organization. Alright, so one thing we did forget to do is go back to the mesh. I don't know why I opened this window, and just hit Ctrl T to triangulate it. Make sure to triangulate before you export to do the bakes, so that the triangulation is the same and uniform throughout different programs. Right, once we've done that, we can select all the low poly objects, hit export, FBX. Make sure to tick limit to selected objects and apply transform. Also, if you want, you can disable bake animations because we don't use the animations. And then call it whatever you want with an underscore low. Also, make sure to export the high poly mesh in the same way, but change the underscore low to underscore high. Hit export. And that's good to go. Then you can open up your Marmoset toolbag. I am using Marmoset toolbag 4, but you should be able to use any older or newer version. For this is pretty much a uniform workflow. So we hit the bread icon. We call this whatever you want. In my case, Kimber Bake Project. And over here you can see Quick Loader with a little drop down. If we click load and select our low and high FBXs, it will import both of them and create a folder for each low and high poly mesh. This is why it had to be named correctly. Right, okay, so we're gonna enable the high poly. Then I'm gonna make everything invisible other than the barrel. Go to low. Increase the cage opacity to maximum and take maximum offset and reduce it all the way down. No, we're going to ignore that for now. As you can see, the mesh, the high poly mesh, is clipping through the cage, which is not what we want. So we're going to slightly increase until we do get full coverage of the high poly mesh. Make sure not to put too much so that it doesn't overlap itself, because it will create bake errors. So you kind of want to just find the perfect size. Also, just to get rid of the annoying pop-up, I'm just going to quickly go to output. It says bake.psd. We're going to click the three dots. Go create a bake textures folder. Select that folder. Call it bake. And then I'm going to save as PNG. Hit save. Alright. Now we're going to go through each mesh and make sure that the cage is correctly offset. Make sure there's full coverage. Even if you see a tiny bit coming through, you need to fully engulf it, because it will create problems in the texture. Alright, once you've set up your cage and you can still see bits poking through, but you don't want to increase the cage anymore, you can manually go and paint offset. You can hold left control and left click to increase the paint, the strength of offset. In my case, it doesn't seem to work well, so we're kind of forced to keep increasing this until it does engulf it properly. Right, so there's a bit of an issue for this specific mesh. I'm going to quickly fix it. But before I do fix it, I'm going to quickly save this. Right, so in our case, what the problem is, I think, is that the triangles are too tight. Yep. So we can adjust the triangles a bit. Yeah, that actually seems uniform. No deformation. All is good. So with the fix done, we can just re-export it again. Alright, the program re-imported the new low poly, the fixed low poly. And here we can see it is working fine. Yeah, it was just lacking some geometry. It was a very, very tight triangle. Okay, so with that out of the way, all the cages have been set up properly. We're going to hit the bake project again. Disable the high poly, so it's only the low poly. And now we're going to fiddle with the settings a bit. I usually take the samples and max them out to 64. You can soften the... I'm not 100% sure what this does, but I have found that when you go full soften, it does do some triangle artifacts, which I'm not a fan of, so I'm going to keep it off in this case. I'm going to set it to 4K. I'm going to select the maps that we do need, which is normals, normals object, curvature, and ambient occlusion. Once all of that is done, you hit bake. Okay, once it's done thinking, we can hit the P to preview the materials, the bake textures. Alright. Looks very much like the high poly, which is good. Just a quick little test. I'm going to set the microsurface to max, which is the roughness, just to see if there's any incorrectly flowing shapes, which I don't seem to see any. Maybe increase metalness again. Yeah, here's one issue. As you can see, it's like weird triangle deformations. This is most likely because we didn't add in a hot edge around that. Right, for now I'm not really seeing any other issues, so we're going to quickly fix this. Back in Blender, as you can see, yep. There's these triangles here which are messing up. Relatively simple fix, hopefully. Make sharp here. Or maybe it's not even on the same plane? Maybe give it a triangle there as well. Alright, re-export, re-import, okay, and hit bake again. Alright, yep, that seems to have fixed it. Great. There's a bit of a bleed over here. Not too much of an issue though. Alright, I think it's decent. So we can Control save, close this off, and pull up Substance Painter. Okay, so Substance Painter is up. I'm going to hit File, New, select the file, find the low poly mesh, open that up, import baked maps, click that for the drop down, add, find the baked maps, select them, open, and then hit OK. And there's our gun. Under texture set settings, we're gonna set up the according maps accordingly. And there it is. We're also gonna bake additional maps that Substance Painter may require. So position, thickness, height, bed normals, opacity. We're not gonna use opacity, so there's no point for that. Thickness as well, there's no point for it really, but you can bake it just in case some material or something else is required. Alright, okay, so click common settings, output size, we're going to set it to the same resolution as the texture, so 4K. You can fiddle with the settings if you want, but I usually tend to leave it as is, and then just hit bake selected textures. Alright, once that's done, we click return to painting mode, and we should be ready to texture. I'm just going to take a closer look at certain areas, make sure there's no visible issues. The current material, it doesn't look like it, which is good. A quick test you could do is just add the very reflective metal on. There's some issues with the grip. Looks like this needs some sharpening as well. So I reckon I'm going to go back, sharpen up some edges, make sure that the grip is baked properly, and then hopefully get back to the same place as we are right now. Alright, we're back. Seems to have fixed the issue. There's still very slight warping, no problems, because we can just apply material over it and it will pretty much fix it. Everything else seems fine. You could even put materials, small materials or whatever that you already have to test how it looks. But of course we're going to make our own as a part of the tutorial. Or a workflow, or walkthrough I should say. Alright, so it's looking alright. Resolution wise it's looking good. A lot of cool stuff we can do with this now. Alright, just another quick thing. I'm going to show you how I set up my viewport in Substance Painter as well. Usually I use the Studio 05, 06 or the Tomoko HDRI. I prefer Tomoko in fact because it does give some nice lighting. Also I activate glare, which is bloom, and change the shape to just normal bloom, so it's nothing fancy. And I do also have Ace's lookup table downloaded and enabled. There are tutorials out there to let you do that. I will try to put a link of one of those tutorials if you do want to set this up like this. There's plenty of benefits for it. You can see light values properly, and it just helps with art in general, and it looks way better as well. Right, you can also go down here if you want to use emissive, which we probably will. We're going to set it to 5, maybe too much, maybe 2. And we can enable bent normals. This kind of helps simulate somewhat realistic lighting. It does create some artifacts like this here, which isn't really nice, but when you're looking at the general picture, for example, if we disable this, what would be a good example? As you can see here, it's really dark without it, and if you do enable it, it kind of blends it more to make it look like there's more light bounce around it. So for certain models it looks better. In this case it doesn't look too good. No worries though, we can just keep it off. You can also enable displacement if you do want to use some tessellation or height map or whatever, but we're not going to fiddle with that. And if you do want it to do transparent objects for some whatever reason, scope or plastic, you can enable PBR metallic alpha blending. And then just a quick tutorial on that as well. Once you've enabled that shader, you can go down to texture settings, hit plus on the channels, and apply opacity. Same with emissive if you want to use emissive. But we're not really going to use that, we're just going to use PBR. Metallic. Alright, so we're pretty much set up to work. So we're going to get started with the materials.